Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Asymmetric Habits live podcast. Again, you can always find us later on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'm Jerry Hanley, friendly neighborhood strength coach of Viking Performance Training. Here with my good friend Jonathan Pishner of Apex Counseling. And again, we're two bald guys with amazing beards who just love to get together and talk about ways to make your life better through mindset and or fitness and physical habits. So today's topic is one that I'm going to go and just say this one's game changing if you can manage to appropriately apply this into your life. And that is focusing on the step that you're on, not 9 steps ahead. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, JP. I feel like this is one of these ideas that I think a lot of people like kind of understand, but it's just so hard to actually apply and even realize that you're doing it.
Well, it's hard to apply. In a way, it's almost hard to understand because a lot of people are going to hear that and they're going to think that the advice is don't have a plan, which is not the
Oh,
advice.
okay.
But a lot of people also accidentally get too in love with creating a perfect plan, and then they don't actually get their action step, or they do things out of order, and it's just this whole mess of over optimizing the wrong things at the wrong times.
Yeah. I actually didn't even think about the just don't have a plan part. So, like, okay, so if you're listening to this, I think there's two situations from my experience where you're very likely to falter here, so to speak. And that is one, like you just said, JP, having spend so much time planning, focusing on the what ifs in the future that you just never give enough a time, attention, and focus effort to what you need to do right now, or multitasking. That, like, I feel like that's the other common one is we're wired in this society to believe that we can do so many different things at once, that we should be able to, that it's somehow our fault if we're not, or just that it means we're motivated individuals, that we focus on so many things that we end up just not being able to focus on the step we're actually on right now. And again, it just so many negatives really come from this, and it's unfortunate because it is such a um avoidable mistake, so to speak. Like, I mean, just simply what you're doing, you miss out on the experience of being in the moment, which, especially if it's something, like positive, if it's a good experience, you don't want to be missing out on that. Or
Mhm.
just if you're working, the quality of your work suffers because you're not focused on it. You don't get you hit deadlines slower because you're just not focused on. There's so many unfortunate things that can be avoided by improving this action in your life.
Yeah, and of course, the one that I'm most familiar with from helping people through counseling is uh, that they have a thing that they want to work on, and they could have started 10 years ago, but they didn't actually start on step one, and so they're way behind where they could be if they had just started at step one instead of trying to either over plan or work on the wrong things at the wrong times. That's the way I usually end up encountering it is, oh man, if you had known to just start on the one thing and work on it for a while, you'd be 2, 3, 5 years ahead.
Hmm. And it's something that I hear so often too. Like, exact same thing. Like, well, this happens all the time with fitness, people coming in. And I actually just had a post on social media a couple of days ago where I kind of wrote about it in a way. I didn't think about it, but I mentioned how, so many times when we're deciding that we want to make a change to our fitness, get started again, get started training, get healthier. But then if we don't go get help that we actually need, it's like, okay, if you try to do all these things on your own together, but you don't really know what you're doing or have that accountability, what are the chances 6 months from now you're going to be anywhere different?
Mhm.
And again,
Since I was already planning to use fitness as an example, since it's such a common example, let's kind of run through some of the common errors of people getting out of order and out of step. So things that you have seen where people accidentally start at the wrong step. What are some of the things where you've seen people start at the wrong step? I know
yes, for sure.
I'll add mine here in a second.
Yeah. So the number one is jumping into workouts that are too advanced or too hard for you, which is especially common in two big situations. One of them is if you're somebody who's been really fit before, so you try to
Yep.
do something closer to the level you were at, or if you're somebody who gets into it by like going to the gym with friends, something like that. But then you don't have kind of proper barriers or bumpers, if you will, like to keep you to actually tell you to do more of a beginning workout, and you try to do
Mhm.
something with the more advanced people. You try to hang with your friends. That one happens a lot with high schoolers, for example. The typical school kid going to the gym with their friends. They don't want to seem like they're weak, type of thing. But adults
Yep.
do that just as well. They go to their Orange Theory class or CrossFit class with their friends, something like that, or just a gym workout. You don't want to, whether it's because you don't want to be showing up or you don't know any better, go in and just to go too hard. That one's so
Mhm.
important because that one can come back and get you either like at worst through increased chance of injury, which will instantly stop your
Well,
progress or slow
practical
it down.
guarantee of injury depending on how hard you go.
Exactly. Or at best, it could make you again, like so much more sore and out of it than you would be from that again it actually slows you down or maybe stops you from taking any more steps. That's
Mhm.
the biggest one.
And I've gotten to see some even better ones because that one is almost obvious. One of the places I've seen people get out of step on fitness is not even on the fitness portion. They'll start doing goals that we don't even know if are possible. I mean, you've heard
Mhm.
me bitch however many times about like, oh, I'm going to lose this number of pounds. Uh, for a lot of people don't even know like how many pounds they can reasonably afford to lose and retain health.
That's so
I was
true.
talking to one of my friends who's a nutrition coach, Tiffany, the other day, and she, I guess, had a client who was trying to get down to 0% body fat, which is not only probably not possible, it's damn sure not healthy. But they had accidentally gotten way out of step and made up in their mind this goal without even knowing if it was possible or healthy. I don't even know where they got this thing. Um, and it was just like, getting out of step with goals. Some people will start at the wrong step through like, I think I told you this story because I think it's how we got on this as a topic. One of the fellows at the gym stopped me the other day and he just started, like it was kind of young kid, maybe like high school or college, and he had just started lifting weights, like his second time there. And he was like, "Hey, what can I ask you? What supplements do you take?"
Mhm. That'll
And I
move
remember,
the needle for sure because that's
yeah,
a big one.
and I already had in my head like, and I even told him I was like, "No, I'm not going to talk to you about supplements. I
Mhm.
will talk to you about how to lift heavy weights properly. And if you hang out here for long enough, a couple of years, and start making gains, then we'll talk about supplements. But you're not on the supplement step. You're on the lift weights and eat a lot step."
Mhm.
And so he was already kind of getting out of order and getting on the wrong step because he was going to try and do too many things at once instead of building up a good fitness base.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's all kinds of ways this can look, uh, but it's hard to tell what should be the beginning step for a lot of people unless you actually like buy a program. For a lot of people, that's the real challenge is like, okay, what step am I actually on? What problem should I be solving right in this moment? Because, like you said, we're so good at multitasking and so encouraged to it, we accidentally try and solve 9 problems at once. And so the real challenge, like if we can help with anything today, that my hope would be like helping people have some idea of how to tell what step they should actually even be on so they can focus on it.
Ooh, that's good, and that's a big skill. That's a big skill, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you're actually going to do that. Yep. Like so often, like people struggle with this when it's foundational work. I said like the getting back at like just basics. Basics are boring. Like that's like almost across the board, people understand that basics are boring, or feel that way. But what you find is most people who actually do make progress in the different areas that they want to, it's almost always because they have some foundational mastery of the basics, either mastery or consistency, one or the other. And that goes, yeah, with
And if
things
your workout's exciting, it's probably not very good.
right. Like it's like yeah, exactly. Talk to everybody who's like a big time like fitness person. They've been at the gym for years. Maybe they compete now. They have boring times in their workouts because it's about doing the work that they know they need to do to get to that next step, to that last step. And yeah, like the foundation of, like you said, like going to the gym in the first place and doing the basic exercises that you need to. Same thing with if it's like more of an overall health thing, the foundations of eating a decent diet based on real food, way more than any supplement's going to take it. But then, other ways too, like same thing, like with a business, if you're involved with that, like you need to get your foundational processes, how you're going to actually treat and handle customers and clients, how you're going to deliver the service or the goods, how you're going to bill them, things like that. You need to figure out foundations before you can figure out the fancy stuff later. I mean, like I don't like Amazon's a great example of this in the business place. They were like, I have no clue what Jeff Bezos was thinking in 1995 or 1997, if he ever planned on doing what Amazon is now. But when he started, he's like, I have figured out a way to get books and deliver them to people. I'm going to sell books online. And, that was what he was doing until it grew big enough to like go into the next step.
You know what it reminds me of? That reminds me of. I didn't think of this until you were saying that, but it's such a wonderful example potentially. There's a comedian. He sadly passed away. His name was Mitch Hedberg, and he made a joke about like the Pringles clearly did not intend to sell potato chips. They had intended to sell tennis balls because the shape of the canister. And he said, what happened was when the day the rubber was supposed to show up, a big truckload of potatoes arrived, but Pringles was laid back and just said, fuck it, cut them up. Uh, and of course, it's a funny joke, but in a way, it's also not a bad illustration because it's like if you take the joke and pretend it's real, like, oh, okay, we have canisters, we have something. Let's still try and figure out how to put them together and sell it because our point is to sell things. So even though the joke is funny, it's also a decent illustration of like, here's a good way to think through what step should I actually be on to get where I want to go. And so one of the things that I really like touching on with people, because in a way, it's hard for people to think this way because we're so damn used to multitasking, but it really does help if people are willing to do it with themselves and willing to go through the discomfort of like an unrealistic question. A good unrealistic question to ask yourself to figure out what step you should be on is, for the thing I'm trying to do, whatever it is, get fit, start a business, whatever. If I was allowed to do only one thing today and nothing else, what would it be? So for fitness, if I was allowed to only pick up something heavy or do cardio or eat less or I don't know what the hell else goes into fitness, create a workout plan or, dot, 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 all the way down the line. If I was allowed to do one thing, what should I do? For my goals, I should pick up a heavy thing and think of nothing else. And while you do oftentimes have to do different things in a day to meet your goals, if you use that unrealistic question, it really distills down like, what step should I be on right this second? Once you get good at it, the first time you ask yourself that question, here's what will actually happen. You'll go into complete vapor lock because the idea of doing only one thing is so outlandish and horrifying to you that like you'll almost be scared to try and explore it in that way. You'll be like, oh, well, what if it's four things? And it'll almost be a challenge just to ask the damn question.
Yep. Hold on to that four things thought for a second, because what you just said, I mean, perfect example by adding my experience to the same thing is, yeah, like I I became, like a strong lifter. And so with me getting like working on getting back into shape and where I want to be, so many times the step that I would go to would be, let me make my workout plan first. And just like you said, like that actually wasn't the step. That was a good step for me every time when I was in consistent lifting shape, was making sure that I had my plan and wrote it out. But once I started backtracking a little bit and just got out of that routine, that was not the right step for me, because I didn't have the steps needed to actually make sure that I was staying with it on a regular basis
Mhm.
enough, and was slowly, detraining myself. So I couldn't necessarily handle what I was writing in the first place. So I went from decades, basically, yeah, 20 plus years of let me write my workout plan being the first logical step every time, to I had to get to the point and realize where go out and move on a daily basis being the actual step I needed to be on. And that's
Mhm.
how my 30-minute walks up and down my driveway started, that we talked
Yeah.
about last time. And doing that and finally only focusing on that is what finally let me get enough of a routine and a habit with it to get to the next step of thinking about harder workouts or what else I can do. But yeah, like I had to go all the way back to find the right step that I needed to be on, because
Mhm.
it's different. Like so, like it's not always the right step. Like you have to know where you're at, where you want to, or like you have to try to find out where you want to go and where you're at now to know where to go from there.
Yeah. Um, one of my favorite people to listen to, not because he's my absolute favorite for advice giving, but as far as like understanding what step somebody is on, listening to Dave Ramsey's podcast is sometimes a good reminder for this, because he will absolutely, when people call in, jump all over them for trying to be on step 4 when they're on step 2. Uh, and while, like I said, he's not my favorite advice giver, he is my favorite as far as being able to distill for a person, what step are you on? Why the hell are you doing anything besides that step? Stop it, please, for the love of God, stop.
Yeah, and I mean, that is why he's successful. Like, again, like whether you like him or not, like that's basically one of the big reasons he's successful, is he gets so many people to at least act on that. Um, yeah, like overall opinion of him notwithstanding, things like
Yeah.
that. So you mentioned, yeah, like you can go from one step, and then before we know it, we've added things to get to
Mhm.
like where we have four, and that is definitely a big one, that people struggle with, is that like we'll narrow down, and then it's so easy for us to just add things to the list because we think it needs to be there too. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
what's my priority today? And then 5 minutes later, we've come up with four other priorities that made their way on the list.
Mhm.
you know, so what are some like tips, like what are some strategies people can actually use to not open that door, to stop keeping themselves from that?
Oh, this is gonna be some disappointing advice. Uh, Stop it. uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, but I mean, and in a way that's banal, but in a way, uh, a lot of people talk themselves into doing more, and then they look for some fancy strategy to talk themselves into doing less, and there's not one. Oh God, you see this all the time. I mean, let's stick with the fitness example. Um, and I'll tell on myself because I laughed at myself. It was hilarious. I can't remember if I told you this story because it's pretty recent. Um, I'm doing a set of workouts that really requires that you take the appropriate amount of rest, and if you don't do that, you're screwing up. And my multitasking, let me do more brain immediately came up with the thought was, I wonder if there's a way I can rest faster. And of course, I immediately laughed at myself because of how absurd that is. Uh, but I mean, a lot of people immediately start trying to come up with, uh, you know, oh well, what else can I do? And then they'll try and find some elaborate method for not doing that. When I had that thought, I mean, what was my elaborate method for not falling into that? I was like, no, I need to rest. That's literally the step I am on. If I do anything related to working out today, it has to be physically restful. Like that would have been a good day to create a workout plan because I was not allowed to pick up heavy things that day. But yeah, a lot of people look for elaborate ways to talk themselves out of things and don't realize that sometimes inaction or things that look like inaction is the actual action step that day.
Interesting. Okay, interesting.
Because
This happens the other way
here's a good
too.
example. Let's do a business one. People like these examples too. All right, so I need to arrange something, a meeting with somebody. And okay, I've sent the message. Hey, we need to meet. Let's do the thing. And now what do? I freaking wait. Like I can't just like start bombarding them with messages.
Oh man.
Inaction is the actual action step in that moment, especially for that item.
Well, that's not. I know you started that one being business. That's just human communication now.
Well, yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, that's if you're asking for a date. That's if you're, I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Because like as soon as we ask that question, we like want to know. It's so hard to remember. That's when for me it's helpful to like we've had this conversation before. That for me like referencing prehistoric times, aka like the 90s and back. Like it's helpful for me. So that's the type of thing where it's like if I'm like that and I'm feeling antsy, wanting to know like what the next step is going to be or the response, remembering that 20 years ago somebody couldn't respond that quickly is actually helpful to me. No, I know it's like
That's a good framework. Yeah.
yeah, because things are so available so fast now. So actually, what you're saying about people trying to like kind of get around something or using complex, trying to come up with complex methods. This happens the other way too, which is like a danger of the flip side. Like when people are almost too motivated or they have that spike, there's a big danger to want to come up with something so grandiose that we do that again instead of just simply thinking about what we need to do, what's the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to like the planning. Spend so much time planning this like awesome thing where if we don't get started, it doesn't matter. Or there's so many what ifs in the whole plan that it's like a house of cards. It's like, okay, one thing goes wrong, this whole thing falls apart. So you just wasted all that time if you even get that far.
Mm-hmm.
I know because that was me. And that was one place I struggled in. This goes back at least to being a teenager, maybe younger. So I'd actually would love to know somewhere along the line of my developmental childhood, I exited it with the idea that the perfect plan lied in complexity. Like, I don't know if that was from movies, from cartoons. Like, I don't know where I came up. Like, somewhere that's where I exited.
Watching too much Batman.
Like it might have been. It's like, yeah, where I kept thinking, it's like, oh, if I can be the smartest man in the room and come up with the perfect plan, that is how I will definitely like succeed. And so it's weird. So everything involved the complex version of things for decades.
Mm-hmm.
For decades. Like it it took basically like finally stepping back or out completely to realize like, oh wow, like actually simple things work better. Like simplicity works better. This is why, yeah, like, in the end, when it like using fitness again, you can completely overthink it, or you can just go to the gym and either, well, if your goal is just simply something in losing weight, just go somewhere and start walking, figure the rest out later. Or if your goal is, like you said, something a little bit more, but you don't know about the plan yet, good chance that the best workout you can do in the gym is going to involve like dumbbells, barbells, or kettlebells. So like
Well,
do
and
big
man,
stuff.
that statement you were making, like, oh, I need the perfect plan lies in complexity. I should have remembered this earlier, but there's a second unrealistic question I like asking clients that really helps a lot with this. And I don't know when I stumbled on this. It's within the last year or two. But I started asking clients, especially with a love of getting on the wrong step and a love of complexity, how would you go about this if you were stupid?
Mhm.
If you like just had a low IQ and you couldn't think all of these magnificently complicated things in your head, and you were still going to try and pursue this goal, what would you do if you just had no ability to think complex, abstract thoughts? And you arrive at a lot of the same space, you know. And hell, let's even do the Bezos example. I assume he's reasonably intelligent, but like he had a source for books and he had the internet, and he was like, I will sell books on the internet.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it gained complexity as it went, but anybody with a source for books and an internet connection could have created that business
Yep.
as long as they understood get books, sell on internet.
Yeah. Um, man, there are great examples in the business world. Netflix, before they, for anybody who's under the age of, I don't know, 25 or something, 28. I don't know what it is now, but Netflix started by mailing DVDs, and the first thing they did
Back
was,
when I
hey,
was your age, the internet came in the mail.
yeah, exactly. Like, um, and yeah, so when they, part of their story is when they were thinking about it, the first thing they did was take a CD, put it in an envelope, and mail it to see if it worked. Like they weren't already thinking like about distribution networks. What movie catalog are they going to have? They understood, we're like, hey, like the only thing, like, does this even work? Like, can we send DVDs in the mail? Like, is this a thing? And they went and tried that. I know Airbnb, that's part of their story too, was like the whole renting houses thing for a day, or like hotels, had never been done. So one of the founders of Airbnb just put his house up as like an advertisement for a weekend or something, like, and somebody, rented, like, again, that initial model worked, and they were like, oh, cool, like, and then they thought about the
And
next
oh
step.
god, that's so wonderful because it's like, what's the action step? Will people rent house for 2 days? Yes. What's next action step?
Mhm.
How much will people pay? $500. Like, and I mean, it's just like you can see the logical progression of action steps. And as long as you don't overcomplicate it, yeah, like the early stages of any of those businesses make a lot of sense.
Yeah, they really, like, I think it's great when you find out and look at them. I like I think I've mentioned before, like, Shoe Dog, the book by
Yeah.
Nike, is one of my favorites, like that, and the whole book is filled with that type of thing. Like, we just need to figure out the problem we have right now, or this step, and that's what matters. Like, that's survival. I mean, in their case, they're talking about survival, but even in little things. Um, I'm gonna give, like, okay, so another business example here is like this one. I'm gonna go kind of opposite. I'm gonna go complex and bring it backwards. So bear with me for about 60 to 90 seconds. Um, so in a lot of like bigger businesses, you have multiple people running it, or eventually they end up multiple people running it. And a lot of times they end up with, you have the visionary, who's the one who has all the ideas, and they end up with somebody different called, like, like an integrator, who is actually in charge of integrating what they need to do to make the ideas happen, but also for ignoring the things the visionary comes up with that are not important, or not important right now. And I've heard a lot of different people talk about this, but in essence, because what happens is, especially the person running the business a lot of times, or who started it, tends to have a new idea like every day, like all the time. It's like, oh, they're like, well, this is the next thing we need to do. Let's do this next. And that, like, okay, like that got the direction started for the business. But yeah, like, you can't keep growing. You can't even stay necessarily functional like that. You can't be doing different stuff every single day. It takes somebody else in those cases to be like, all right, that's awesome. You have that. We're going to take this one idea you had and focus on this one for 3 months,
Mhm.
and it's like, that's it. Like, it's the culling of that impulse to keep doing something else that makes a lot of those businesses or business partnerships effective. And it's so often with that, like, this is where, like, for me, pen and paper helps me so much, because I kind of have to go through that process myself. Is I will constantly write down all the things that I want to do, whether with this, with the gym, or or my own fit, if it's me fitness wise or just responsibilities, I'll have those, but then it's like, okay, like I have finally gotten to the point where I can much better, much more effectively do that. Maybe give them a quick little priority order and then only focus on the one until it's done. And it's
Mhm.
really weird, like at first, like, and there's still going to be tendencies to be pulled to something else, but it's definitely not like 100% success rate. But finally doing that and being like, okay, this is the one I'm going to do, and I'm only going to do this like every time I get a block to work on what's important until it's done or until it's set up.
Yeah. Well, and, talking of, like, adding the complexity or not, if you look around, you can find people and businesses who focus on one thing and have done that for long enough that, like, they just end up being amazingly good or amazingly successful. They don't even have to add complexity. Uh, we don't have this on the East Coast, but I love it whenever I go to the West Coast and I get to go visit In-N-Out. I don't know if you've ever been to In-N-Out. In-N-Out is a love letter to the American burger joint, and their simplicity is so wonderful. There are 3 items on that menu: burger, fries, shake. If you want anything that is not those 3 things, you're going somewhere else. But they have taken that and just focused on it so hard and so much and perfected it to such a level that it's like a business that now almost can't be beat. Uh, and you can take that the same thing with a lot of people. I mean, athletes are an obvious example, um, but there's dozens and dozens of people who are specialists in one thing, and they didn't have to add complexity. I mean, how many other skills does a brain surgeon have besides be brain surgeon? Like,
Mhm.
but they just focused on that to such a high level that then they make stupid amounts of money. And what I'm really kind of like wanting to use this as is it's okay to want to add complexity if you really want to, and if that somehow serves your goal. It's also okay to reject complexity. And a
Yes.
lot of people have trouble with the idea of rejecting complexity uh, in service of their goals because they're like you. They think like, if I can come up with this grand strategy that like it's somehow better. Um, but there's a lot of situations where if you take the simplistic approach, it's actually just as likely or more likely to win than the complex approach.
Yep. Hmm. Sports are a good example for it over and over again. Like I said, like which teams do the basics better? Like those are almost always the ones that if they don't win the whole thing, they're at least like always very competitive and and in the mix. And I mean, Michael Jordan has always talked about he always would do the basics. Starting off every single day, he always started off with just chest passes.
Yep.
It's just like doing like he doesn't forget the basics and then builds up on those steps. I do want to like you know, goals are one of these things where like goals are highly valuable to get us specific things or in specific places that we want to. But again, like it's the steps that we actually take that like on the way there that get it. Like people like I think everybody can use a reminder sometimes that goals are a direction, but they themselves are not going to achieve anything. Like if you have a goal of losing 40 pounds, like nothing happens because you have that goal. Like you have to do the calorie burning activities. You have to be in the calorie deficit when you're eating. Like those things have to happen to lose 40 pounds. And to achieve almost anything, it takes time. So you can't just do like again using the perfection model we talked about earlier. You can't do the perfect thing for like 2 weeks and lose 40 pounds. It's like you have to do the consistent thing more often than not in the direction of your goal so that you actually increase your chances of succeeding it or bypassing it.
Mhm.
And this is an individual thing, but this is also structural in some cases, and we need to be aware of that. Like I don't know why this one came to mind like 2 minutes ago, but the school system messes this up. most of the time, because, or at least in America, because how, like, you go into school and so much of it is already with the idea of like blah blah blah, you're going like go to college or do these things so you can go to the right college, blah blah blah, get the best test scores, rather than focusing on like, wow, why don't I just actually try to like do the best I can, like say with my school year or with my school day, at learning what we're going over, learning how to learn, learning how to do complex thinking, etc., rather than thinking like 6 years down the road, will my test scores and GPA be high enough to get me to this college that I think I would like to go to?
Well, let's sit with that for a second, because that's actually a wonderful example organizationally. What steps should I be on? And if there's anybody in the school system listening, this would be a wonderful thing to assist you in a lot of ways, because that's a great example of people being on the wrong step. Selling 14-year-olds on college and why that's important and how that's important. That's an absurdly 97 steps ahead.
Mhm.
If you wanted to improve results and improve behaviors within schools, an interesting step to try out as a potential first one is, how do I make what I'm teaching interesting? Like, that would be great for 14-year-olds. Like, okay, I have to teach them how to solve for X. How in the hell can I make this interesting to 14-year-olds? That would be a good step, which would serve, because I mean, if they learn how to solve for X, then they're passing the class and they're getting their skills and they can still end up in college. But trying to sell them on the benefits of college when their ability to do cost benefit analyses is basically non-existent anyway is such an absurdly far ahead step yeah. So I'm glad you selected that example. And by no means am I trying to like tell schools they suck or anything, but it's just like organizationally, it's very easy to get on the wrong step instead of what steps should we be on. Like 17-year-olds, we should be starting to sell like, hey, you should be thinking about college. What, do you know what you might want to do after high school?
Mhm.
That's an okay step. 12 years old, I am challenged to see how that would be an appropriate step.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. It's like there's just way too much focus on achieving an end process cast across the wide net of students, that I wonder like how much that could be improved by, yeah, exactly, focusing on the correct step. And like you
However,
said,
sadly, in the organizational sense, we can't like just throw this out and an organization will start to use it, because those take so long to turn around. Individually, people can start using this immediately. Organizationally, well, good luck if somebody tries to apply this in the schools. I wish you well.
yes, exactly. All right, brother. And you want to summarize this for everybody, for our dear listeners here?
Yes. So this is a tricky one to apply, because, of course, knowing whether you're on the right step is difficult, but you can at least know that focusing on multiple steps at once is a wrong thing. And man, I wish I'd have thought of your directional metaphor in the beginning instead of in the end. So I'm going to expand on it for the summary. It's correct to plan to a certain degree. If I want to march 50 miles that direction and get to a mountain peak, I should plan a little bit, but I shouldn't try and account for, am I going to encounter these 17 types of predators and these 14 different land structures? And what about this weather? Da, 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 da. I should plan for one or two things that I'm pretty guaranteed to encounter. And past that, maybe I should just deal with them as they come, because otherwise I'm still going to be planning 17 years from now instead of already walking.
Mm-hmm.
So it is challenging, but as you work this skill and get a better sense of what steps should I be on, and speaking as somebody who used to love complexity and is now a little better at this does get easier, but the first bit of it is a challenge for thinking.
Yep. All right, brother. It's a great time as always getting in here. This is one that we've both gone through. And like I said, it was funny to me halfway through, and I realized, I'm like, man, this is another one that literally goes back to cartoons for me. So something like that. So
All of my disorders I learned from cartoons.
yeah. Like cartoons or video games, one or the other. Who knows? So, all right, everybody. Hope you got some value out of this. Again, Asymmetric Habits episode live every 2 weeks. Can find us on Apple and Spotify podcasts as well. Would love it if you shared it, subscribe, drop the review if you got some value out of this. And meanwhile, JP and I will catch you guys later.
See y'all.